Far across the shifting landscapes of late Ice Age Europe, people live as foragers. They move with the seasons, following rivers, forests, and open plains. Their lives are woven into cycles of game, wild plants, and fire. Long before the first crops reach this land, humans know the forests and valleys in intimate detail. Every tree, every animal track, every stone blade carries meaning. The air is cooler than today. Glaciers linger in the north, their weight pressing the land. Meltwater flows outward, feeding wide rivers such as the Danube, the Elbe, and the Rhine. Coastlines stretch farther than in the present age, for so much water is still locked in ice. Forests are patchy in some regions, while steppe grasses cover others. Elk, aurochs, red deer, and wild horses wander. People move lightly within this world, leaving only scattered hearths, stone flakes, and bones behind. Archaeologists find traces of them in caves and open-air camps, charcoal marks where fires once burned. Red ochre stains hint at ritual, or perhaps at simple body decoration. In southern Europe, shell beads are uncovered far inland, carried by exchange or memory of the sea. Such objects travel across many days of walking. They show that networks of contact exist, long before settled villages. At this time, all food comes from the wild. Women and men dig roots, gather berries, hunt birds, and fish in rivers swollen by glacial melt. Microscopic remains of starch found on grinding stones reveal that wild grasses are already used. Seeds are pounded into flour, baked into flat cakes. These are not yet domesticated crops, but the first steps toward shaping plants are present. Stone tools are the companions of daily life. Knapped flint blades cut meat, scrape hides, and carve wood. Bone and antler are also used, shaped into needles, harpoons, and points. Archaeologists discover caches of such tools left behind, perhaps as reserves for future visits. The evidence tells of mobility. Families move often, returning to favored places, leaving behind clues in layers of soil. One lesser-known detail comes from northern Spain. In a cave called El Mirón, a woman is buried around 18,700 years ago. Her bones sprinkled with red ochre. A scallop shell, carried from the distant coast, lies nearby. Her presence marks the endurance of memory. She lived before farming, but in her grave lies the story of how humans carry symbols across time. The climate is shifting as the Ice Age ends. Around 12,000 years ago, warming begins. Forests expand. Birch and pine take root where before only tundra spread. Later, oaks and hazels grow, filling Europe with dense woodland. Rivers cut through valleys, their courses lined with willow and alder. The return of trees alters animal populations. Deer thrive, while large herds of bison and wild horse diminish. Foragers adapt, hunting smaller, faster prey, and learning to gather the nuts and fruits of new trees. Within this green world, there is mystery. Archaeologists wonder how foragers perceive the coming changes. Did they sense the slow arrival of warmth, the spread of new plants, the retreat of glaciers? We cannot know. No words survive. Only scattered remains speak for them. Yet the record suggests flexibility. The diversity of tools grows. The number of plant remains rises. Adaptation is constant. Planetary forces shape everything. As the climate warms, sea levels rise. The Great Plain that once connected Britain to the continent, known today as Doggerland, floods slowly. Marshes become bays, then seas. People living there retreat to higher ground, carrying their memories and tools. Such shifts unfold over centuries, yet within human lifetimes they are visible. Coastlines creep inland, forests sink, rivers change course. These are the quiet pressures that shape choices. In Central Europe, along the Danube Valley, seasonal camps dot the terraces. Here, archaeologists find traces of huts built with branches and covered with hides. Hearths cluster inside, their ash mixed with bone fragments. Flint from distant sources lies among them, carried perhaps 200 kilometers from its origin. Such detail reveals the scale of human movement. Distances longer than the width of modern nations are crossed on foot, step by step. To the west, in France, painted caves record visions. At sites like Lascaux and Chauvet, animals are drawn on stone walls with ochre, charcoal, and manganese. They depict aurochs, horses, lions, and mammoths. The images belong to earlier millennia, yet their memory may linger in stories. They are signs that human imagination already seeks permanence. Long before crops and herds, there are images, symbols, and marks of belonging. In Northern Europe, archaeologists uncover great cemeteries, such as at Skatholm in Sweden. Burials of men, women, and children are found with grave goods, harpoons, flint blades, red deer antlers. Dogs are also buried, suggesting close bonds with animals even before domestication of livestock. Such sites reveal the richness of forager societies. They are not simple or uniform. They hold diversity, ritual, and memory. Mysteries remain. How many people lived in Europe at this time? Estimates vary, but likely only tens of thousands across vast distances. Entire valleys may hold fewer families than a single modern village. Yet within this sparse population, networks connect groups. Stones, shells, and ideas travel. Genetic studies reveal small populations with high mobility, often mixing across regions. The story is one of wide landscapes and scattered bands, tied together by kinship and exchange. At the edge of forests, people burn clearings. Charcoal layers in soil suggest intentional use of fire to manage plants. Certain nut trees thrive after burning, providing richer harvests. Such practices hint at knowledge of how to shape the land, long before the arrival of wheat and barley. This is the quiet prelude to farming. Not yet agriculture, but an early awareness of growth, regeneration, and renewal. As the section closes, the stage is set. Foragers roam Europe, skilled and adaptive, their lives tied to rivers, forests, and plains. The glaciers retreat, forests spread, seas rise, unknown to them. Far away in the hills of the Fertile Crescent, a new experiment has begun. There, wild grasses are tended, seeds are sown, animals are herded. Slowly, those ideas will move westward. In time, they will transform Europe forever. But for now, the people remain hunters, gatherers, and fishers, moving with the rhythms of a changing earth. Far to the southeast of Europe, in a landscape of rolling hills and river valleys, the first seeds are chosen. Around 11,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, human communities begin to alter plants in ways that change history. Here, wild grasses such as einkorn and emmer wheat are gathered, their stalks cut with flint blades set into wooden handles. Over generations, people notice that some grains fall less easily, clinging to the stem. Those seeds are easier to collect. They are planted again, slowly, without plan or design. Domestication begins. Barley follows a similar path. It grows well in dry soils and resists the harsh summer sun. Lentils, peas, and chickpeas join the basket of cultivated plants. These crops offer protein and variety. Together, they form the foundation of farming life. Archaeologists uncover charred seeds in ancient hearths, each fragment a clue to meals long past. Some grains bear marks of deliberate grinding, pounded between stones to make flour. The transformation from wild harvest to cultivated field is slow, yet steady. Alongside plants, animals also enter a new relationship with people. Goats are among the first. Descendants of wild Bezoar goats from the Zagros Mountains, they adapt well to human care. Sheep follow, prized for meat and later for wool. Pigs, derived from wild boar, are tamed in the forests. Cattle are brought under control. Strong and powerful animals that can later pull loads. The Neolithic revolution is not only about crops, but also about herds that shape landscapes. The shift from foraging to farming is not immediate. Archaeological layers show mixtures of wild and domestic species side by side. People experiment. They gather wild fruits while tending barley plots. They hunt gazelle while keeping small goat herds. Life is not yet one of rigid fields, but of gradual blending. Still, the evidence points to a turning point. More time is spent near fields. More energy invested in animals. The rhythms of mobility begin to slow. One lesser-known detail is found in Jerf el Amar, a site on the banks of the Euphrates in modern Syria. Excavations reveal communal buildings with storage pits. Inside are remains of cereal grains, carefully kept. These pits are among the earliest signs of surplus food. They show planning beyond the daily meal. Food can now be stored for lean seasons. With storage comes new choices, staying longer in one place, building more permanent shelters, and organizing communities around shared resources. This transformation is also visible in tools. Flint sickle blades, glossed by the silica of cut grasses, reveal repetitive harvesting. Grinding stones become more common, worn smooth by thousands of strokes. Mortars and pestles of basalt and limestone appear. The toolkit of farming differs from that of foraging, shaped by the needs of planting, harvesting, and preparing grain. Archaeologists find them across the Levant and Anatolia, each artifact a sign of growing reliance on cultivation. Yet mysteries remain. Why did farming begin here, and not elsewhere? Climate may have played a role. After the last ice age, around 11,700 years ago, the Holocene brings warmth and stability. Rain falls more regularly. Wild ancestors of wheat and barley grow densely across the Fertile Crescent. Foragers see fields of grain ripening under the sun, inviting experimentation. But not all scholars agree. Some suggest social or ritual factors mattered as well, that feasting or symbolic meaning encouraged cultivation. The true spark remains unknown. Planetary forces set the background. As glaciers retreat, rainfall patterns shift. The Sahara, now dry, is at times green and fertile. Rivers flow where today there is desert. The Near East becomes a mosaic of habitats, rich in plants and animals. The abundance provides opportunities, yet also challenges. Populations rise. More mouths to feed require more stable sources of food. Farming offers that, though at the cost of harder labor and greater dependence on the land. Genetic evidence adds another layer. Studies of ancient plant DNA show how specific mutations, like tougher seed husks or non-shattering stalks, spread. These traits are signs of domestication. In animals, genetic changes mark the difference between wild and tame. Goat and sheep bones from early sites show patterns of selective slaughter, with young males killed and females kept for breeding. Such choices leave signatures visible thousands of years later. As the Neolithic way of life forms, new social patterns emerge. Permanent houses of mud brick rise, clustered in small villages. Hearths mark family spaces. Floors are replastered, walls repaired. Year after year, communities grow, linked by shared work in fields and herds. Pottery, though still rare in the earliest phases, begins to appear. Simple clay vessels hold grain, water, and milk. Each innovation ties people more closely to place. One striking site is Tsayonu in southeastern Anatolia. Here, buildings are arranged in rows, with stone foundations. Some structures contain evidence of communal rituals, including platforms stained with red substances. Among the finds are figurines carved from stone, perhaps linked to fertility or protection. The site shows that farming is not only economic, but also cultural. New ways of living are accompanied by new beliefs and practices. To the west, in central Anatolia, lies Çatalhöyük, slightly later in time but equally important. Though not the very first farming village, it reveals what settled life can become. Densely packed houses, entered through roofs, form a maze of mud brick. Walls are decorated with paintings of animals and geometric patterns. Burials are placed beneath floors. The community shares both labor and memory. From such villages, farming traditions will later move toward Europe. Still, not all groups adopt farming. Foragers continue to thrive in nearby regions. In some places, farming spreads quickly. In others, it takes centuries before crops and herds replace wild food. The mosaic of lifestyles is complex. Archaeologists see evidence of exchange between foragers and farmers. Obsidian from Anatolia travels far, traded for shells or hides. Farming is not a sudden replacement, but a gradual, uneven expansion. The question of why people accepted the burdens of farming lingers. Fields require labor, weeding, watering, and guarding. Herds demand care and protection. The diet becomes narrower, focused on grains. Skeletons of early farmers show signs of harder physical strain, and sometimes poorer health compared to foragers. Yet the stability of food and the ability to support larger families outweigh the costs. Farming becomes the path forward. As these changes unfold in the Fertile Crescent, their influence spreads. Step by step, crops and animals move westward. Traders, migrants, and families carry seeds in baskets, goats on leashes, and knowledge in memory. The movement is slow, taking generations, but its direction is clear. Europe, still the land of forests and rivers, will soon feel the arrival of this new way of life. Across the rugged landscapes of Anatolia, the farming way of life begins its slow, westward journey. The land is a bridge between Asia and Europe, a corridor of mountains, plateaus, and fertile valleys. Here, the first farmers move with their animals, carrying seeds of wheat and barley, lentils and peas, and the memory of villages left behind. The Neolithic spreads not in a sudden wave, but step by step, across rivers and ridges, through passes and along coasts, each movement leaving traces for archaeologists to uncover. Anatolia is vast and diverse. In the east rise the Taurus and Zagros ranges, their slopes rich in obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for sharp cutting edges. Villages near these sources become centers of trade. Obsidian from Anatolia is found hundreds of kilometers away, in Syria, Mesopotamia, and later in Europe, showing how networks already connect distant groups. Along with stone, knowledge travels. how to plant grains, how to care for goats, how to build with mud brick and timber. The plateau of central Anatolia holds some of the earliest evidence of settled farming life. At Hoyuk, a site dating to around 8200 BCE, people live in clusters of mud brick houses, hearths burn within rooms, and bones of domesticated sheep and goats appear. The settlement endures for centuries, rebuilt layer upon layer, revealing continuity. Archaeologists note cut marks on animal bones that suggest controlled herding rather than simple hunting. Here, farming and herding take firm root. Further west, at sites like Bonkuklu Hoyuk, life blends old and new. Foraging continues alongside cultivation. The bones of wild animals remain common, but domesticated plants appear in the soil. This mosaic reflects the gradual nature of change. Farming is not an immediate revolution, but a long negotiation with landscapes and traditions. Families still gather nuts and hunt gazelle, yet they also sow barley in small plots. It is a time of overlapping ways of life. One lesser-known detail comes from the obsidian quarries at Golu Dağı. Archaeologists have traced the movement of obsidian blocks from this volcanic mountain across vast distances, even to the Balkans in later periods. These journeys suggest that farming spread not only through migration, but also through exchange. People far away may have first encountered wheat or sheep through contact with traders carrying volcanic glass. The stone, shimmering black and sharp-edged, is both tool and medium of cultural transmission. The climate of the early Holocene shapes these movements, warmer and wetter than the Ice Age. Anatolia's valleys bloom with grasses, shrubs, and forests of oak and pistachio. Rivers such as the Halys and the Sakarya flow with seasonal floods, enriching the soil. This abundance encourages settlement, yet the land is not uniform. In drier regions, irrigation and careful management are needed. In higher plateaus, herding proves more reliable than farming. People adapt their strategies to the terrain, adjusting where to sow, where to graze. Mysteries linger. Did farming spread through the migration of entire communities, or by gradual adoption among local foragers? Archaeologists debate this question. In some areas, genetic studies suggest that newcomers carried crops and animals, replacing or mixing with earlier inhabitants. In others, foragers seem to adopt farming practices without large population shifts. The answer may vary from place to place, a mosaic rather than a single story. Planetary-scale forces are again at work. As the Atlantic Ocean warms, rainfall patterns shift over the Mediterranean. Periods of drought alternate with wetter years, creating challenges for early farmers. Soil cores from Anatolia show layers of dust blown in from drier lands, reminders of instability. These fluctuations test the resilience of crops and herds. Yet farming communities persist, relying on stored grain and diversified resources. The continuity of villages through these centuries reveals their adaptability. Architecture also evolves. Houses in Anatolia are built close together, often sharing walls. Roofs provide access, with ladders leading down into rooms. Some structures contain plastered platforms, perhaps for sleeping or working. At Çatalhöyük, slightly later but within the same broad tradition, wall paintings depict hunting scenes and geometric designs. Bulls' horns are set into walls, their presence a sign of ritual. These details reveal that life in early farming villages is not only practical, but symbolic. Homes are spaces of memory and meaning. As farming spreads across Anatolia, burial practices shift. Some individuals are interred beneath house floors, wrapped in mats, or placed with ornaments of shell and stone. Such practices suggest a growing connection between family, household, and ancestry. The dead rest within the living space, binding generations together. Archaeologists find beads of obsidian, carved figurines, and tools placed with the deceased. Each burial tells of values and beliefs tied to the new settled life. Rivers guide expansion. The valleys of western Anatolia provide corridors toward the Aegean. Sites such as Ulukak and Hachilar show evidence of early farming by the 7th millennium BCE. Wheat, barley, lentils, and sheep appear in these settlements, carried westward across mountains and plains. Pottery also becomes more common here. Simple vessels used for cooking and storage. The spread of farming is marked not only by crops and animals, but by clay hardened in fire, shaping daily routines. A subtle but significant detail lies in the presence of loom weights at some sites. These clay weights suggest weaving, perhaps of wool or flax. If sheep are kept not only for meat, but also for fibers, a new dimension of farming economy appears. Textiles allow storage of warmth, creation of clothing, and perhaps even trade. Such finds hint at complexity beyond subsistence. Farming brings with it crafts, technologies, and social exchanges that weave communities together. Still, mysteries remain unsolved. How did early farmers decide which valleys to settle? Which mountains to cross? Were choices guided by memory of past migrations or by exploration of new frontiers? Archaeologists piece together fragments, but much is unknown. What is clear is that the journey across Anatolia is slow, measured in centuries. Farming does not rush across the land. It settles deeply in some places, lingers in others, and waits for the right moment to continue westward. From a planetary perspective, the spread of farming across Anatolia is part of a larger pattern. Around the world, in China, New Guinea, and the Americas, other peoples are also experimenting with plants and animals. These processes are independent, yet linked by the same Holocene climate that makes cultivation possible. In Anatolia, Europe's first farmers are being shaped. From here, the seeds of the Neolithic will soon cross into the Balkans, opening a new chapter. By the close of this section, Anatolia stands as a threshold. In its mountains, villages endure, storing grain, herding goats, shaping obsidian into blades. In its valleys, crops are sown, harvests gathered, clay vessels fired, rivers carve pathways westward. The memory of foragers remains, yet a new rhythm dominates: the tending of fields, the keeping of animals, the repair of houses year after year. Beyond the Aegean, Europe awaits, still forested and wild. The seeds are ready to travel. From the hills and valleys of Anatolia, the path of farming reaches the edge of the European continent. Beyond the Aegean Sea lie new landscapes, the Balkans, with their rivers, plains, and forested mountains. It is here, around the 7th millennium BCE, that the first farming communities cross into Europe. The movement is not dramatic. It unfolds over generations, through coastal voyages and river valleys, as families carry seeds, animals, and the memory of settled life westward. The crossing takes different forms. Some farmers sail short distances across the Aegean, island to island, using simple boats of wood and reed. Archaeologists cannot reconstruct the exact craft, but traces of obsidian from the island of Melos, found in mainland sites, prove that sea travel is already practiced. If stone can move, so can people, and with them come grains and goats. Other groups walk northward through Thrace, following the plains that connect Anatolia to southeastern Europe. In both directions, the frontier shifts slowly, step by step. The Balkans welcome these arrivals with fertile soils. The valleys of the Maritsa, Vardar, and Morava rivers provide rich alluvium for crops. Rainfall is reliable, and forests of oak and beech give timber for building. The environment is different from Anatolia, yet familiar enough to support wheat and barley. Early villages appear, small clusters of houses with storage pits and hearths. Archaeologists identify them by pottery styles and plant remains, which show the unmistakable signature of domesticated crops. One well-known site is Nea Nicomedia in northern Greece, dating to around 6200 BCE. Excavations reveal houses of wattle and daub arranged in rows. The floors are plastered, and hearths lie at the center. Charred grains of wheat and barley are found, along with bones of domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats. Figurines of clay, some depicting seated female forms, are also uncovered. They hint at symbolic practices tied to fertility, household, or community. The settlement marks one of the earliest fully farming communities in Europe. Another important region is the Thessalian Plain. Here, sites like Sesklo and Achaleion show evidence of early farming around 6500 BCE. Houses are larger, some with stone foundations. Pottery, decorated with red paint, appears, one of the first signs of artistic expression in ceramics on European soil. Storage bins hold grain, and grinding stones are abundant. The villages grow in size, suggesting that farming supports larger populations than foraging once did. A lesser-known detail comes from the spread of domesticated cattle. While sheep and goats are easier to herd in rough terrain, cattle require open pastures and abundant water. Their presence in early Balkan sites indicates adaptation to new environments. The bones show signs of selective slaughter, with young males killed and females kept for milk and breeding. This management reveals both knowledge and planning, a system that sustains communities year after year. Still, mysteries surround the first crossing. Did farmers arrive in small pioneer groups or in larger waves? Archaeologists debate whether foragers of southeastern Europe adopted farming quickly through contact, or whether migrants replaced them. Ancient DNA studies show that early European farmers share ancestry with Anatolian populations, suggesting that migration played a strong role. Yet the story is not uniform. In some areas, mixing with local foragers occurs, leaving genetic signatures of blended communities. Planetary forces frame this chapter. As the Holocene climate stabilizes, Europe grows warmer and wetter. Forests expand across the Balkans, filled with oak, elm, and hazel. Rivers flood in spring, replenishing soils. The landscape offers abundance, but also challenge. Fields must be cleared from dense woodland. Stone axes, polished to sharp edges, make this possible. Farmers fell trees, burn stumps, and open patches of sunlight where wheat can grow. The forest is both barrier and resource, providing timber, fuel, and game. One of the most striking archaeological markers of this time is pottery. Unlike earlier phases where clay vessels were rare, Balkan farmers produce ceramics in many forms: bowls, jars, and pots. Some are plain, others painted or incised. Pottery serves both practical and symbolic purposes. It stores grain, carries water, cooks meals. It also carries designs that may mark identity, belief, or memory. Through pottery, archaeologists trace the spread of farming across the region. Each style, each motif, is a clue to movement and connection. Burial practices also change. In some Balkan sites, Individuals are interred within settlements, beneath house floors, echoing traditions from Anatolia. Others are buried in cemeteries outside the village. Grave goods include beads of stone and shell, bone tools, and figurines. Such practices reveal continuity and adaptation. The dead remain part of community life, binding generations together. The rivers of southeastern Europe act as corridors of expansion. The Danube, flowing from the Balkans northward into Central Europe, becomes a great artery of movement. Along its banks, villages appear in sequence, each a step further from the Aegean. These communities carry similar crops, animals, and pottery, showing how farming traditions travel. The Danube will later serve as the main route by which the Neolithic spreads deep into the continent. Yet even as farmers arrive, foragers remain. In coastal and mountainous regions, hunting, fishing, and gathering continue. Shell middens, piles of discarded shells, testify to diets rich in marine resources. Stone tools of forager tradition are found alongside farming artifacts, suggesting contact. Some groups resist farming for centuries, preferring mobility and wild foods. The encounter between farmers and foragers is not one of immediate replacement, but of coexistence, tension, and exchange. A subtle but telling sign of cultural blending appears in ornaments. At some Balkan sites, beads of Mediterranean shells are found far inland, while stone tools from local sources appear in farming villages. These items move through networks that connect both lifestyles. The Neolithic frontier is porous, shaped by trade, marriage, and shared knowledge. The transformation of Europe is gradual, and its edges are complex. From a planetary perspective, the crossing into Europe is part of a greater wave of human adaptation. Farming spreads not only westward into Europe, but also eastward into Iran and the Indus, and later into Egypt and North Africa. The Balkans are one branch of this vast story, a gateway to the continent. The choices made here, how to clear forests, how to graze animals, how to store grain, will echo across millennia. By the close of this section, the threshold has been crossed. Farming villages stand on European soil. Houses of timber and clay cluster near rivers. Fields of wheat and barley grow where once only wild plants stood. Herds of goats, sheep, and cattle graze in clearings. Pottery holds grain. Fire warms hearths. Ancestors rest beneath floors. Europe is no longer only the land of foragers. A new chapter begins, one that will spread outward through rivers, forests, and plains, transforming the continent step by step. When farming reaches the heart of Europe, the great forests become both shelter and obstacle. Unlike the open plains of Anatolia or the fertile river valleys of the Near East, much of Europe is covered by dense woodland. Oaks, hazels, elms, and lindens spread across vast areas, their canopies closing the sky. Beneath them grow thickets of shrubs, vines, and ferns. For farmers, these forests must be reshaped to plant wheat and barley, to graze cattle and sheep. Clearings are needed. The process is slow and laborious. Stone axes, polished to smooth edges, are the primary tools. With each swing, farmers cut into trunks, weakening trees until they topple. Fire becomes another ally. Controlled burning clears undergrowth, opens patches of sunlight, and enriches the soil with ash. Archaeologists studying soil layers find ancient charcoal horizons, dark traces of these fires, preserved for thousands of years. These bands reveal the deliberate transformation of Europe's forests into farmland. Fields are small at first, carved from woodland in patches near villages. Grain grows in these openings, ripening under summer sun. hazelnuts, abundant at the forest edge, remain an important supplement. Villagers gather them in large quantities, their shells preserved in archaeological sites. The forest is never entirely pushed back. It continues to provide wild foods, berries, mushrooms, game animals, and timber for building. But the balance shifts. Step by step, clearings spread, stitched together into landscapes of field and woodland. One lesser-known detail comes from pollen analysis. In lake sediments across Europe, scientists track ancient vegetation. Layers of pollen grains show when forests decline and cereals rise. In places like Lake Zurich, the first significant traces of wheat and barley pollen appear around 5500 BCE. Alongside them, declines in elm pollen suggest human activity, perhaps the cutting of elm for fodder or disease spread by beetles. These microscopic records are silent witnesses of the first farmers reshaping ecosystems. Villages anchor this transformation. Longhouses, common in Central Europe, rise as timber frames covered with thatch and clay. Some measure over 20 meters in length, housing extended families. Inside, hearths burn, storage pits hold grain, and platforms provide sleeping spaces. Surrounding these houses are small fields and enclosures for animals. The contrast is clear. Where once only forest stood, now there are open areas with cultivated plots and domesticated herds. The animals themselves shape the clearings. Cattle graze on grasses that sprout after burning. Pigs forage among roots and acorns. Sheep and goats nibble shrubs, keeping regrowth low. Their presence accelerates the transformation of woodland to pasture. Archaeologists find hoofprints preserved in ancient mud and dung layers mixed with settlement debris. These humble traces show that animals are not just food sources, but living agents of landscape change. Still, mysteries remain. How did early farmers decide which areas to clear? Were choices guided by soil fertility, by proximity to rivers, or by traditions carried from Anatolia? Archaeological surveys reveal variation. Some villages cluster near fertile loess soils, ideal for crops. Others occupy river terraces, where water is abundant and soil is renewed by floods. The diversity of locations suggests experimentation and adaptation, not a single pattern. From a planetary scale, Europe's forests are part of a broader story. As the Holocene climate stabilizes, woodlands expand across temperate zones worldwide. In North America and East Asia, similar forests spread. Human communities everywhere face the same question: how to live within or against the trees. In Europe, the Neolithic farmers answer by cutting, burning, and grazing, slowly bending the forest to their needs. Yet the trees endure, always pressing at the edges of fields, always ready to reclaim abandoned plots. Archaeological evidence also shows cycles of use. Some clearings are farmed for a few years, then left fallow when soils tire. Families shift fields, opening new patches, allowing old ones to recover. This shifting cultivation leaves a mosaic of woodland and farmland. Over centuries, the pattern creates semi-open landscapes, rich in biodiversity. Even today, ancient wood pastures in Europe bear the legacy of these Neolithic practices. The work of clearing is hard. Studies of skeletal remains from Neolithic cemeteries show signs of physical strain. Spinal wear, joint stress, and injuries suggest repetitive labor, perhaps from felling trees or carrying heavy loads. Farmers trade the mobility of foraging for the toil of cultivation, yet they gain stability, surplus, and the possibility of supporting larger families. The balance of effort and reward shapes their daily existence. A subtle detail lies in the survival of sacred groves. Even as fields spread, some trees are left standing. At times, these may serve practical purposes, providing shade, landmarks, or boundary markers. But some may also hold symbolic meaning. Figurines and ritual deposits found near tree stumps suggest that certain trees are honored. Archaeologists cannot know the beliefs in full, but the selective preservation of particular groves hints at reverence for the forest even in its cutting. Encounters with wild animals also continue. In the deep woods, aurochs, red deer, and wild boar roam. Farmers hunt them, supplementing diets of domestic meat. Bones of wild species remain common in settlements. These hunts may serve not only for food, but for status, ritual, or tradition. The forest remains both resource and mystery, a space outside the order of fields and houses. The transformation of forests is not uniform across Europe. In the Balkans, clearings appear earlier, with farming villages spreading quickly. In Central Europe, the linear band ceramic culture, named for its pottery decorated with linear bands, emerges around 5500 BCE. These communities settle fertile loess plains, carving fields from forest. In northern and western Europe, where soils are poorer and climates cooler, the spread of farming is slower. Forests remain dominant longer, resisting rapid clearance. One unresolved question is how climate fluctuations influenced forest clearance. Around 6200 BCE, a sudden cooling event disrupted rainfall and temperatures. Some sites show signs of abandonment, others of resilience. Did harsher winters and shorter growing seasons force farmers to open larger clearings, or to retreat to more favorable valleys? The answers are still debated, hidden in layers of soil and bone. At the planetary level, the act of forest clearance links humans to carbon cycles. Burning trees releases carbon into the atmosphere, altering balances. Though tiny compared to modern times, these ancient fires mark the first human reshaping of climate through land use. The fingerprints of early farming are detectable in ice cores, where slight rises in greenhouse gases coincide with Neolithic expansion. The forests of Europe are part of this long story of human impact on the Earth system. By the close of this section, Europe stands transformed in patches. Where dense woodland once stretched unbroken, openings now appear. Fields of wheat ripple in the wind, bordered by stands of oak and hazel. Cattle graze in meadows. Pigs root in forest margins. Sheep and goats scatter across pastures. Smoke rises from controlled burns. Hearths glow within timber longhouses, and storage pits hold grain for the winter. The forest remains vast, but its edges are shifting. The Neolithic farmers have begun the great task of reshaping Europe's green heart, one clearing at a time. As farming communities spread deeper into Europe, a new kind of architecture rises from the soil. Villages take on form and permanence, anchored by houses of timber and clay. These are not temporary shelters of hides and brush, but durable structures meant to last years, even decades. The walls stand upright, the floors are replastered again and again, and the hearths burn in the same places, season after season. In this stillness, human life is reshaped, moving away from constant wandering toward rooted existence. The longhouse becomes one of the most striking symbols of this change. Built with massive oak posts driven into the ground, its frame supports walls of woven branches covered with daub, clay mixed with straw and dung. Roofs are steep, thatched with reeds or grasses, shedding rain and snow. Some houses extend more than 20 meters in length, wide enough to shelter extended families, animals, and stored food under a single roof. Archaeologists reconstruct them from post holes and collapsed daub, the ghostly outlines of vanished timbers still visible in the earth. Inside, life follows daily rhythms. A central hearth provides heat and light. Storage pits and clay bins hold grain, carefully sealed against dampness. Grinding stones lie near the walls, their surfaces worn smooth from endless turning of seeds into flour. Platforms or benches along the sides may serve as sleeping spaces. Smoke lingers under the roof, filtering through thatch. The house becomes both dwelling and workshop, a place of cooking, weaving, tool-making, and conversation. Villages are clusters of these houses, arranged in loose rows or circles. Some are enclosed by ditches or palisades, not necessarily for defense, but perhaps to mark boundaries or control animals. Paths wind between structures, connecting homes, work areas, and open spaces. In some settlements, archaeologists find evidence of communal buildings, larger structures that may serve gatherings, rituals, or storage. The layout reflects both practical needs and social bonds. One lesser-known detail comes from the site of Lepenski Vir, on the banks of the Danube in modern Serbia. Though slightly earlier and transitional between foragers and farmers, it reveals extraordinary architecture. Houses are trapezoidal, with stone-paved floors aligned carefully to the river. Carved stone sculptures of human fish forms are found within them, suggesting spiritual practices linked to water and abundance. This site shows that even before farming dominates, people invest effort in permanent, symbolically charged architecture. Across Central Europe, the linear band ceramic culture, or LBK, emerges around 5500 BCE, named for its pottery decorated with incised lines. These people are among the first to build longhouses systematically across the fertile Loess soils. Villages may contain dozens of houses, each aligned in similar directions, perhaps following cosmological or practical rules. Surrounding fields stretch outward, while forests are cut for timber and pasture. Archaeological surveys reveal hundreds of such villages scattered across the Danube basin and beyond. Mysteries remain about how households were organized. Did extended families share a single longhouse? Or did multiple nuclear families live side by side? The size suggests complexity, but the evidence is fragmentary. Burial patterns may offer clues. Some cemeteries contain individuals with ornaments of shells, stone beads, or polished axes, while others are more modest. Differences in grave goods hint at emerging social distinctions, perhaps linked to household roles or lineage. From a planetary perspective, the rise of permanent houses reflects the broader stabilization of climate during the Holocene. With seasons more predictable, people invest in fixed architecture. Timber is abundant in Europe's forests, clay lies underfoot, and reeds grow in riverside marshes. These materials are renewable, allowing continuous rebuilding. Villages endure for generations, layered like the sediments of rivers. Archaeologists peel back these layers, finding floors replastered up to 15 times, each one a footprint of continuity. Pottery becomes integral to domestic life. Clay vessels, hardened in open fires, serve for cooking stews, storing liquids, and fermenting foods. Some are plain, others painted or incised with designs. Their presence transforms diets. Grains can be boiled into porridges, milk heated into curds, and meat simmered slowly. The clay walls absorb traces of food. Analysis of residues reveals dairy fats, showing that milk processing begins early. Pottery expands culinary possibilities, deepening the role of the household as a center of subsistence. Animal keeping also reshapes the house. In some regions, small pens may be attached to longhouses. sheltering pigs or calves during winter. Dung layers inside abandoned houses attest to this practice. Such integration blurs the line between domestic space and barn. Humans and animals live in close proximity, sharing warmth and risk. Diseases may pass more easily, but so too does resilience, for animals provide meat, milk, hides, and traction. One subtle detail lies in the decoration of walls. At sites like Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, plastered walls bear paintings of animals, geometric patterns, and even landscapes. In some European villages, daub fragments show traces of red ochre pigment, suggesting similar practices. The home is not merely functional, it is expressive. Symbolic meaning is embedded in architecture, making each house both shelter and story. Yet challenges accompany permanence. Fire, once a controlled tool of mobile foragers, becomes a constant hazard. Thatched roofs and timber frames are vulnerable to sparks. Archaeologists often find entire villages destroyed by fire, their houses collapsed and blackened. Whether accidental or intentional, these burnings leave thick layers of ash that preserve artifacts in place. Through them, archaeologists glimpse moments of daily life frozen in destruction. Pots still filled with grain, tools lying on floors, bones scattered by collapse. Social life adapts to the rhythms of settled villages. Work is divided among households, yet shared tasks such as clearing forests, digging ditches, or maintaining paths require cooperation. Over time, communities develop systems of coordination. Some archaeologists suggest that the layout of houses in rows reflects collective planning, a sign that villages function as more than loose gatherings of families. In permanence arises the need for order. Still, mysteries linger about the spiritual dimensions of these spaces. Figurines of clay and stone are found in houses, often depicting human or animal forms. Were they toys, charms, or representations of deities? The answer is unknown. Hearths, too, may hold symbolic weight as centers of warmth and continuity. Some houses contain burials beneath floors, anchoring the living to their ancestors. The boundary between domestic and sacred blurs within these walls. From a planetary viewpoint, the rise of timber and clay villages marks a shift in energy use. Forests are cut steadily for beams, posts, and fuel. Each longhouse requires dozens of trees. Over centuries, landscapes around villages change, becoming mosaics of fields, pastures, and coppiced woods. This feedback loop links architecture to environment. Human need for shelter reshapes ecosystems, just as ecosystems shape the possibilities of architecture. By the close of this section, Europe's farming villages stand firm. Longhouses line the Loess plains, smoke curling from hearths, pottery jars rest against plastered walls. Grain fills storage pits, animals graze in nearby enclosures. Beneath floors, ancestors lie at rest, their memory bound to place. The forest presses at the edges, yet within the cleared spaces, human permanence takes root. Timber and clay, fire and stone, together they form the architecture of the Neolithic, anchoring communities in a new rhythm of life. Within the new villages of Europe, life begins to change not only through crops and houses, but also through animals. Herds of goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle now live alongside humans, reshaping daily rhythms and landscapes. These animals, once wild and hunted, are brought under human control. They are bred, sheltered, and moved between pastures. Their presence transforms food, labor, and even belief. The first animals to spread widely into Europe are sheep and goats. Descended from wild ancestors of the Near East, they are hardy, adaptable, and small enough to manage. They graze on shrubs and grasses, often thriving in marginal areas where crops do poorly. Archaeologists studying bones from Neolithic sites find patterns of selective culling. Young males slaughtered for meat, while females are kept alive for breeding. This strategy ensures herds reproduce steadily. By maintaining females, communities secure not just meat, but milk, wool, and hides across many seasons. Cattle follow, larger and more powerful. Their ancestors, the aurochs, once roamed Europe in great herds, fierce and difficult to hunt. Domesticated cattle retain much of their strength, but they grow more docile through human selection. They provide abundant meat, thick hides, and milk. Later, they will also serve as draft animals, pulling loads and plows. Their importance is visible in settlement remains. Bones of cattle dominate refuse pits, and figurines carved of clay depict their forms. At some sites, cattle skulls are displayed in houses or communal buildings, suggesting symbolic roles beyond utility. Pigs are another essential presence. Unlike sheep and goats, they root in forests, feeding on acorns, roots, and tubers. They are less suited to open pasture, but they thrive in woodland edges. Archaeological finds of pig bones show both wild and domestic varieties, sometimes intermixed. This suggests that farmers allowed pigs to roam freely, breeding with wild boar. Pigs reproduce quickly, offering a reliable source of protein. Their ability to adapt to many environments makes them a versatile addition to Neolithic economies. One lesser-known detail lies in early evidence of dairying. Chemical analysis of pottery residues reveals traces of milk fats. At sites in the Balkans and Central Europe, some vessels once contained milk, yogurt, or cheese. This suggests that farmers processed milk early, reducing lactose content and making it more digestible. Such practices expand dietary possibilities, providing nourishment even when crops fail. The quiet innovation of dairying leaves no bones or seeds, but microscopic residues on pottery carry its memory. Animals also change human movement. Herds require grazing land, and pastures must be rotated. Farmers lead animals into clearings, meadows, and river valleys, shaping seasonal patterns of mobility. Though villages are permanent, people do not remain entirely fixed. They guide sheep to higher ground in summer, cattle to riversides in winter. Paths worn by hooves trace new lines across landscapes. These routes later become foundations for trails, roads, and cultural boundaries. Mysteries remain about how animals were perceived beyond food. Did farmers view them as property, companions, or sacred beings? Archaeological clues suggest complexity. At Çatalhöyük, cattle horns are embedded in walls, symbolically powerful. In European longhouses, bones of animals appear in burials, sometimes placed with humans. Dogs, domesticated earlier, are often found buried with care, showing bonds of affection and partnership. The place of animals in Neolithic life extends beyond utility, touching belief and identity. From a planetary perspective, the domestication of animals alters ecosystems. Grazing reshapes vegetation, favoring grasses over shrubs, open meadows over forests. Dung enriches soils, fertilizing fields unintentionally. Yet close contact also brings risks. Diseases jump between humans and animals, leaving traces in skeletal remains. The Neolithic is the beginning of a shared epidemiological history, where herds and humans exchange pathogens as well as sustenance. Archaeologists trace the expansion of animals through bones, isotopes, and DNA. Ancient cattle in Europe show genetic links to Anatolian stock, confirming that domesticated animals are carried westward. Yet wild aurochs also interbreed with herds, leaving mixed signatures. This blending reflects ongoing interaction between domestication and wilderness. Farming is not a strict boundary, but a spectrum of practices. Some animals are tightly controlled, others loosely managed, still tied to wild counterparts. One subtle clue lies in butchery marks on bones. At early sites, bones show standardized cuts, suggesting shared knowledge of slaughter. Meat is divided in predictable ways, hinting at customs of distribution within communities. Who receives the best cuts? Are feasts shared equally, or do some families gain more? The marks on bone whisper of social patterns tied to animal use, though their full meaning is lost. Animals influence architecture as well. Some longhouses contain small enclosures or tethering points, perhaps for calves or pigs. Dung layers within abandoned houses suggest that animals sometimes shelter indoors. Fences, ditches, and pens appear around villages, controlling movement. These features are modest, but they represent investment in managing herds. The village becomes not only a human dwelling, but a shared space of multiple species. The role of animals also extends to ritual. In some cemeteries, cattle bones are placed beside human burials. At others, dogs rest with their owners. Figurines of clay depict sheep, goats, and bulls, sometimes with exaggerated features. Were these offerings charms or teaching tools? The answer remains elusive. What is clear is that animals are present in the imagination, not just the diet. They embody power, fertility, and continuity, shaping stories as well as survival. Planetary forces frame these choices. As the Holocene climate warms, grasslands expand in river valleys and open plains, providing grazing grounds. Seasonal floods replenish meadows, while forests supply mast for pigs. The carrying capacity of landscapes increases, allowing herds to grow. Yet this abundance is fragile. Droughts or harsh winters can decimate animals, forcing farmers to adapt quickly. Resilience depends on diversity, keeping goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle together, so that if one suffers, another sustains. A mystery still debated is how quickly milk use spread. Genetic studies show that most early Europeans were lactose intolerant. Yet milk residues in pottery prove that dairying was practiced. How did people consume it? Perhaps they fermented it into cheese or yogurt, lowering lactose. Perhaps children drank more than adults, benefiting from calories even if discomfort followed. The exact strategies remain uncertain, hidden in vanished practices of preparation. Another subtle clue lies in isotopic studies of bones. These reveal that cattle often grazed near settlements, while sheep and goats sometimes ranged farther. This suggests herding strategies adapted to terrain. Villagers balance the need for nearby meat and milk with the risk of overgrazing. The choices they make shape both herds and landscapes, linking ecology with economy. By the close of this section, European villages hum with life shared between humans and animals. Sheep graze in meadows, goats browse on shrubs, pigs root in oak groves, and cattle graze heavily near rivers. Dogs guard and guide. In houses, pottery jars hold milk residues, bones bear butchery marks, figurines depict horns and hooves. The sounds of bleating, lowing, and rooting mingle with human voices, fire crackles, and grinding stones. Farming in Europe is not only about fields of wheat and barley, it is about animals in the fold, reshaping human existence with every step and every breath. Across the new villages of Europe, tools evolved to meet the challenges of farming. Clearing forests, building houses, grinding grain, and shaping fields all require implements more durable than the sharp flakes of earlier times. It is here that stone technology undergoes a quiet but decisive transformation. Farmers begin to polish and grind stone into smooth, resilient blades. These ground stone tools, heavier and more durable than chipped flint, mark the daily labor of the Neolithic. The polished axe is the most iconic of these tools. Made from hard rocks such as basalt, jadeite, or amphibolite, its surface is ground smooth against sandstone, eliminating the weak edges of flaking. The result is a dense, tough blade, sharper and longer lasting, fixed to wooden hafts with pitch and bindings of sinew or leather. These axes cut deep into trees, felling the oak and elm that once seemed immovable. Archaeologists find them buried in fields, broken by long use, or placed deliberately in graves as symbols of power and identity. Grinding tools also appear in abundance. Querns and handstones, used to crush grain into flour, are made from basalt or sandstone. Their surfaces bear grooves and hollows from years of turning. Each household owns several, worn smooth by the repetitive rhythm of daily grinding. Microscopic traces of starch grains preserved in their pores reveal which crops were processed: emmer, einkorn, barley, peas. These silent stones hold the memory of countless meals, each prepared through patient effort. One lesser-known detail lies in the sourcing of stone. In the Western Alps, green jadeite is quarried from high mountain outcrops, at elevations above 1,500 meters. Archaeologists find axe heads made from this stone hundreds of kilometers away, in Brittany, the Netherlands, and even Britain. Their size and polish suggest they were ceremonial, not practical, objects. They may have served as gifts, symbols of alliance, or offerings to the earth. The circulation of alpine jadeite shows that long-distance networks of exchange connect Neolithic Europe, carrying not only food but also prestige. Flint, however, does not disappear. It remains vital for knives, sickle blades, arrow points, and scrapers. In fact, new techniques of pressure flaking create long, narrow blades ideal for composite tools. Sickles, in particular, combine flint blades set into wooden handles, their edges polished by silica from cereal stalks. These sickles harvest wheat and barley, their glossed edges preserved for archaeologists to read like fingerprints of ancient agriculture. The coexistence of flint and polished stone reflects the balance of continuity and innovation. Mysteries linger about the social meaning of these tools. Some axes are too large or finely made for practical use, suggesting symbolic roles. Were they markers of status, belonging, or spiritual belief? At some sites, broken axes are deposited in rivers or bogs, seemingly as offerings. The deliberate placing of valuable tools in watery places hints at rituals connecting stone, water, and fertility. The line between practical implement and sacred object is blurred, hidden in gestures now lost to time. From a planetary perspective, the shift to polished stone tools signals a broader phase of human adaptation. Across the world, in East Asia, Africa, and the Americas, similar transitions occur. Farmers everywhere discover that grinding stone produces more durable blades, suited to the demands of cultivation. The innovation reflects a universal response to the challenge of reshaping landscapes. The rise of polished axes is not unique to Europe, but part of a global rhythm of technological change. The production of ground stone tools requires effort and specialization. Quarries are opened near sources of basalt, jadeite, or diorite. Rough blocks are extracted, then carried long distances. Some are shaped on site, others transported for finishing elsewhere. Archaeologists find workshops littered with flakes and unfinished axes, testifying to organized labor. The making of a polished axe may take days of grinding, hours of labor invested in a single tool. This investment reflects the growing importance of permanence and durability in farming life. Stone tools also leave their mark on bones. Skeletal remains of Neolithic people show signs of repetitive strain. Shoulders and elbows worn from swinging axes, knees and backs from grinding grain. These traces confirm what the tools suggest. Daily life requires constant physical effort, yet this effort produces stability. With axes, forests fall. With grinding stones, cereals turn into bread. Tools become extensions of human strength, amplifying endurance against the weight of landscapes. A subtle clue lies in the deposition of tools in graves. In some cemeteries, men are buried with polished axes, women with grinding stones. Whether these associations reflect gendered roles or symbolic choices is uncertain. What is clear is that tools carry identity into death, marking individuals by the implements of their labor. Archaeologists read these patterns as windows into social organization, though much remains open to interpretation. Trade in stone expands with farming. Obsidian from Melos, flint from Poland, jadeite from the Alps, all move across hundreds of kilometers. These materials are valued not only for function, but for beauty. The sheen of polished jade, the translucence of obsidian, the sharpness of fine flint, each quality inspires desire. Exchange networks grow, binding distant communities into webs of contact. Along with seeds and animals, tools are the threads that weave Neolithic Europe together. Still, mysteries persist about the symbolic dimension of axes and blades. Some are buried in rivers, lakes, or bogs, far from settlements. At the site of Tybring Vig in Denmark, polished axes are found submerged in coastal waters, carefully placed. Were these offerings to deities, ancestors, or natural forces? Such acts remind us that tools carry meaning beyond utility, standing as bridges between humans and the world around them. From a planetary scale, the rise of stone tools alters not only forests, but also soils and ecosystems. As axes fell trees, as querns grind grain, human impact on the environment deepens. The Holocene landscape is reshaped not by glaciers, but by stone held in human hands. Archaeologists speak of the secondary products revolution, when milk, wool, and traction join meat as uses of animals. The tools of grinding and polishing are part of this same revolution, amplifying human reach. By the close of this section, Europe is filled with the sound of stone against stone. Farmers grind axes smooth, sharpen sickle blades, and turn querns to flour. Forests echo with the thud of falling trees, villages with the rhythm of grinding grain. Exchange networks carry polished jade across mountains, obsidian across seas, flint across plains. Tools lie buried with the dead, deposited in waters, displayed in houses. More than implements, they are symbols of permanence, connection, and transformation. The age of polished stone has begun, and with it, the landscape of Europe is reshaped in new and lasting ways. Across the vast interior of Europe, rivers guide the movement of people, crops, and ideas. These waterways, broad and winding, or narrow and fast, become the lifelines of the Neolithic. They carry not only fish and fresh water, but also connections between distant villages, from the Danube to the Rhine, from the Elbe to the Seine. Rivers shape the spread of farming across the continent. Their currents tie communities together, making them the silent highways of early Europe. The Danube is the most important of these, rising in the Black Forest and flowing eastward for thousands of kilometers. It cuts across Central Europe like a great artery. Along its banks, archaeologists uncover some of the earliest farming villages north of the Balkans. The fertile terraces beside the river provide ideal ground for crops. Floods renew the soil, while the broad waters carry fish and reeds. Villages cluster near its course, and over time, the Danube becomes the main corridor by which farming spreads west and north. The linear band ceramic culture, or LBK, flourishes in these regions. From around 5500 BCE, LBK villages appear along the Danube and its tributaries. Their longhouses stand in rows, their pottery decorated with incised lines. Farmers cultivate wheat and barley, herd cattle and sheep, and clear forests for fields. Archaeologists trace their distribution like a chain of beads, each settlement following the river's bends. The pattern reveals how waterways connect communities, allowing knowledge and goods to travel easily. Rivers also serve as sources of raw materials. Flint nodules are collected from riverbeds, shaped into blades and sickles. Clay from alluvial deposits is dug for pottery, fired in pits near the banks. Water itself is essential for softening hides, tempering clay, and cooking food. These practical uses root settlements near rivers, making proximity to water a constant factor in village life. One lesser-known detail comes from the riverine trade in shells. Beads of Mediterranean spondylus shells, bright red and purple, are found far inland along the Danube. They travel hundreds of kilometers from the Aegean coast, carried by traders who move along rivers. Such ornaments are not mere decorations. They symbolize status, exchange, and connection. Their presence in Central European graves shows that even in the early Neolithic, rivers carry luxury items as well as necessities. Mysteries remain about how far people traveled along these waterways. Did farmers use dugout canoes, hollowed from great tree trunks, to move between villages? Evidence from later periods suggests they did, but direct remains are scarce from the earliest Neolithic. Yet polished axes found far from their quarry sources, and ornaments of shell and obsidian scattered widely, hint strongly at river transport. Footpaths through forests are slow, but rivers flow steadily, inviting movement. From a planetary perspective, rivers respond to Holocene climate shifts. As glaciers melt, water levels rise. The Danube and Rhine swell, their floodplains broadening. Seasonal floods enrich soils, but also threaten villages. Archaeologists find layers of silt covering early houses, reminders of inundations. To live by a river is to accept both abundance and risk. These cycles shape settlement patterns, teaching farmers to adapt to the rhythm of rising and falling waters. The Elbe and Rhine form another corridor. Their valleys, rich with loess soils, become centers of LBK expansion. Farming spreads swiftly here, villages appearing in fertile plains, alongside crops and cattle. Rivers carry traditions of pottery, house design, and burial practices. The Rhine, flowing to the North Sea, connects inland farmers with coastal foragers, bringing together different ways of life. These encounters leave traces in mixed toolkits and exchanged ornaments. Burials along river valleys reveal how strongly people identify with these waters. At some cemeteries, bodies are oriented toward river courses, as though tied symbolically to the flow. Grave goods include fishing tools, nets, and ornaments of river stone. In some cases, children are buried with miniature tools, perhaps reflecting family roles in fishing or farming. These gestures suggest that rivers are more than resources. They are woven into memory and belief. One subtle but telling clue lies in isotopic studies of human bones. By analyzing strontium isotopes, researchers can trace where individuals grew up. Results show that some people buried in riverine villages were not local, but born dozens or hundreds of kilometers away. This mobility suggests marriage or exchange between communities, enabled by rivers. Through these waterways, families, ideas, and genes move, linking distant groups into wider networks. Rivers also structure daily routines. Women fetch water in clay pots. Children play along banks. Men fish with nets or hooks. Herds are driven to drink, and fields are watered by seasonal floods. Querns and grinding stones are washed clean at the edges. In floodplains, farmers collect reeds for roofing, willow for weaving, and clay for daub. The river's resources are woven into every aspect of household life. Mysteries also surround ritual uses of rivers. At some sites, polished axes and figurines are found deposited in riverbeds, deliberately placed. Were these offerings to spirits of water, ancestors, or deities of fertility? Archaeologists can only speculate. The act of giving valuable tools to flowing water suggests reverence. Rivers are seen not just as highways, but as living forces, powerful and unpredictable. From the broad view of planetary systems, rivers are crucial to human dispersal everywhere. In Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates sustain the first cities. In South Asia, the Indus shapes early farming cultures. In Europe, the Danube, Rhine, and Elbe serve this role. They are the connective tissue of landscapes, binding local villages into continental patterns. Without them, the spread of farming would have been slower, more fragmented. With them, the Neolithic advances steadily, village to village, shore to shore. The pace of this expansion is visible in the archaeological record. By 5300 BCE, farming villages line the Danube into Central Europe. By 5000 BCE, they reach the Rhine and Elbe valleys. Each century brings new settlements further west and north. Rivers make this possible, offering routes of least resistance. Though forests remain thick, though mountains loom, rivers carve pathways of continuity. One unresolved question is how farmers interacted with foragers along rivers. Did they trade, intermarry, or compete for fishing grounds? Evidence is mixed. At some sites, forager tools appear in farming villages, suggesting exchange. At others, defensive ditches may hint at tension. Rivers provide contact, but contact does not always mean harmony. The frontier is complex, shaped by cooperation and conflict alike. By the close of this section, Europe's rivers are alive with new significance. Along their banks, longhouses stand, fields stretch outward, and herds graze in meadows. Canoes or rafts may glide on currents, carrying obsidian, shells, and ideas. Floods rise and recede, leaving silt that nourishes crops. Farmers, fishers, and traders all move with the rhythm of flowing water. The rivers of Europe are no longer silent landscapes. They are pathways of change, guiding the Neolithic into the heart of the continent. As the first farmers spread across Europe, they do not enter an empty land. For millennia, hunter-gatherer groups have lived in forests, along rivers, and by coasts. These foragers know the rhythms of wild game, the seasons of berries, the migrations of fish. When farming villages appear, Two ways of life meet. Sometimes they remain apart, keeping distance. At other times, they blend, exchanging goods, partners, and ideas. The story of early Europe is not only about crops and herds, but about encounters between farmers and foragers. In the deep forests of northern and western Europe, foragers continue their traditions. They move lightly, living in small camps near rivers or lakes. Archaeologists find their stone tools, microliths, tiny blades set into wooden shafts for arrows and spears. They leave shell middens on coasts, piles of discarded shells from generations of fishing and gathering. Their diets are diverse: fish, deer, nuts, berries, and birds. Farming offers new foods, but foragers already know abundance. They have little reason to abandon their ways quickly. Farmers, however, bring a different rhythm. Their long houses anchor them to villages. They tend wheat and barley, herd cattle and goats, store grain for winter. Their tools include polished axes and grinding stones, distinct from the microliths of foragers. Archaeologists can see the contrast clearly in the ground. Two toolkits, two economies, two lifeways. When these meet, the results vary. One lesser-known detail comes from the Iron Gates region of the Danube, in today's Serbia and Romania. Here, Mesolithic foragers built elaborate cemeteries long before farmers arrived. They fished the river's rich waters and carved sculptures of human faces in stone. When farmers reached the area, foragers did not vanish. Instead, evidence shows they adopted some farming goods while continuing to fish. Isotopic studies of bones reveal diets that remain heavy in fish even after contact. This suggests blending of traditions rather than simple replacement. Elsewhere, farmers and foragers exchange raw materials. Obsidian from Anatolia travels deep into Europe, carried perhaps by farmers, but found in forager contexts. Baltic amber, valued for its glow, moves southward, passing through hands of hunter-gatherers. Shells from the Mediterranean reach inland sites, far from the sea. These networks show that encounters are not only local, but continental. Foragers act as intermediaries, linking distant groups through exchange. Mysteries remain about the nature of these relationships. Were they peaceful trade partnerships, or uneasy boundaries marked by competition? Archaeological evidence is mixed. At some sites, forager and farmer artifacts appear side by side, suggesting cohabitation or intermarriage. At others, defensive ditches and palisades surround villages, hinting at tension. Perhaps both occurred at different times and places. Human interactions rarely follow a single pattern. From a planetary perspective, these encounters mirror changes elsewhere. In Africa, foragers and herders meet across savannas. In East Asia, rice farmers encounter groups relying on wild plants and game. Across the globe, the shift to farming brings interaction between different ways of life. Europe is one example of this broader story, where rivers and forests form meeting grounds between old and new. Archaeogenetics adds detail to this picture. DNA from early European skeletons shows that farming populations carry ancestry from Anatolia, while foragers retain older lineages rooted in Ice Age Europe. Over time, these ancestries blend. In some regions, farmers largely replace foragers. In others, mixing is extensive, leaving descendants with dual heritage. The pace and degree of blending vary, but the genetic record confirms that encounters are central to Europe's story. A subtle clue lies in dietary isotopes. Bones of some individuals in early farming cemeteries show high levels of marine protein, evidence of fish consumption. Others show purely terrestrial diets of grain and domestic animals. This suggests that within the same communities, some people follow forager diets while others eat like farmers. Perhaps marriages joined families, bringing together different food traditions under one roof. Such findings reveal a mosaic, not a simple divide. Material culture reflects this blending. Pottery styles of farmers sometimes adopt decoration reminiscent of forager art. In return, foragers begin to use pottery, a technology they had not developed earlier. Stone tool forms mix. Polished axes appear in forager contexts, while flint microliths linger in farming villages. These hybrids show that cultural boundaries are porous. People borrow what is useful or meaningful, adapting traditions flexibly. Yet not all encounters lead to harmony. In some cases, farmers expand into fertile valleys, leaving foragers to marginal lands. Competition for hunting grounds or fishing spots may cause friction. Archaeologists find settlements burned, skeletons with injuries, signs of violence. While farming brings stability, it also brings pressure. Larger populations, more land cleared, more resources demanded. Foragers may feel encroached upon, their mobility restricted. These tensions shape the pace of change. Still, foragers persist far longer than once thought. In Scandinavia, hunter-gatherer groups thrive for millennia after farming reaches Central Europe. They continue to fish, hunt seals, and gather wild plants. In the British Isles, farming arrives relatively late, around 4000 BCE, long after continental farmers expand. These delays show that foraging remains viable, especially in rich coastal and riverine environments. Farming is powerful, but not inevitable everywhere at once. Another mystery is how language shifted during these encounters. Farmers likely brought early Indo-European or pre-Indo-European languages, while foragers spoke tongues descended from Ice Age traditions. No written records survive. Yet, through contact and mixture, languages must have changed. Blending words for crops, animals, tools, and rituals. Though invisible, this linguistic exchange parallels the genetic and cultural blending seen in the archaeological record. From a planetary scale, the meeting of farmers and foragers represents a turning point. Foragers live lightly, moving with seasonal abundance. Farmers invest in permanence, altering landscapes. When the two meet, the balance tilts toward farming, but not instantly. Instead, a long period of coexistence unfolds, with diversity of strategies. Europe in the 6th millennium, BCE, is a continent of multiple ways of life, interwoven along rivers and across forests. One subtle piece of evidence comes from children's burials. In some cemeteries, isotopes show that young individuals ate diets different from adults in the same community. Some more like foragers, some more like farmers. This suggests that families themselves may have mixed origins. A child of a forager, mother, and farmer father, or the reverse, might grow up between worlds, embodying the blend of traditions. Such traces reveal encounters not only at the level of exchange, but of kinship and family. By the close of this section, the rivers and forests of Europe echo with many voices. In one clearing, farmers tend cattle and sow barley. Downriver, foragers cast nets and roast fish by the fire. At market-like gatherings, shells, amber, and obsidian change hands. In some valleys, villages rise and spread. In others, hunters and gatherers still roam. The Neolithic expansion is not a single march forward, but a tapestry of meetings, sometimes peaceful, sometimes tense, often creative. It is within these encounters that Europe's first blended societies emerge, shaping the continent's future. As farming life becomes firmly rooted across Europe, new patterns of belief take shape. People no longer move lightly through landscapes, leaving temporary traces. Instead, they live in villages year after year, their ancestors buried beneath floors or in nearby cemeteries. This permanence transforms how they understand the world. Fertility of soil, cycles of crops, and the presence of the dead all intertwine. Rituals of the earth begin to appear, materialized in burials, figurines, and enclosures. The practice of burying the dead within or near settlements is one of the most striking features of Neolithic ritual. In many villages, individuals are placed beneath house floors, wrapped in mats, or laid in shallow pits. Children and adults alike rest under clay platforms where families cook and sleep. These burials bind the living to the dead, rooting memory in domestic space. Archaeologists often find beads, tools, or figurines placed with the deceased. Such grave goods speak to care, identity, and a belief that life continues in another form. In other regions, larger cemeteries emerge. At sites like Varna, on the Black Sea coast, burials from the 5th millennium BCE contain remarkable ornaments of gold, copper, and shell. Some individuals are richly adorned, while others are modestly equipped. These differences hint at growing social distinctions. Yet even the simplest graves often contain symbolic items: polished stone axes, beads of spondylus shell, or animal bones. The act of burial itself is ritual, a way of placing the dead within the rhythms of the earth. One lesser-known detail comes from causewayed enclosures, found in parts of Central and Western Europe. These are circular or oval earthworks, formed by digging ditches and raising banks. Within them, archaeologists find layers of animal bones, pottery, and human remains. Some ditches contain deliberately broken tools, deposited as offerings. These enclosures may have been gathering places where communities held rituals linked to fertility, feasting, or ancestral memory. Their repeated use suggests that they hold meaning far beyond practical defense. Figurines add another dimension: small clay statues of women, men, and animals appear in many Neolithic sites. Some are carefully modeled, others simple and abstract. Their functions remain uncertain. Were they household charms, teaching tools, or depictions of deities? At sites like Sesklo and Çatalhöyük, seated female figures with broad hips have been interpreted as symbols of fertility, though scholars debate such readings. Regardless of meaning, their presence reveals that people shape clay not only for pots, but also for symbols of belief. Mysteries surround these rituals. Did communities imagine gods tied to earth and sky, or spirits dwelling in rivers and forests? Without written records, the answers remain hidden. Yet the material traces, burials, figurines, enclosures suggest a worldview where fertility, death, and continuity are central. The cycle of crops parallels the cycle of life. Just as seeds buried in soil sprout anew, so perhaps the dead return in other forms. The rhythms of farming become metaphors for existence itself. From a planetary perspective, these rituals mirror the rise of symbolic practices in other farming cultures. In the Near East, plastered skulls with shells for eyes are placed in houses. In the Indus Valley, figurines and ornaments reflect ritual care. In Mesoamerica, fields are linked to offerings and feasts. Across the globe, the shift to farming brings new forms of belief, rooted in cycles of growth and permanence. Europe's rituals belong to this larger transformation. Archaeologists also uncover evidence of structured feasting. At some sites, Large pits contain the bones of dozens of cattle or pigs, far more than a single household could consume. These accumulations suggest communal gatherings, perhaps seasonal festivals tied to planting or harvest. Pottery vessels found nearby may have held fermented drinks or cooked stews. Such feasts would have reinforced community bonds, transforming surplus into shared ritual. The act of eating together, in abundance, becomes a sacred practice of renewal. One subtle clue lies in the deliberate breaking of objects. At many sites, pottery vessels, stone axes, and figurines are found shattered and deposited in pits or ditches. These are not accidents. The breaks are intentional. The act of destroying valuable items may symbolize release, offering, or transformation. By breaking tools, people return their power to the earth or to unseen forces. Such practices reveal a logic where objects hold spirit, and their destruction is a form of communication with the sacred. The landscape itself is drawn into ritual. Enclosures, ditches, and earthworks mark places of gathering. Pathways align with solstices, suggesting awareness of celestial cycles. In some regions, standing stones are erected, precursors to the megalithic monuments that will later dominate Atlantic Europe. These early markers reveal a growing desire to inscribe meaning onto land, to shape not only fields for crops, but spaces for memory and ceremony. Mysteries deepen when examining symbolic art. Pottery in some cultures bears painted or incised designs, spirals, zigzags, grids. These motifs may carry meaning beyond decoration. Were they linked to cosmic order, fertility, or lineage? We cannot know with certainty, but the repetition of patterns across regions suggests shared traditions. In this way, designs become threads of cultural identity, binding communities across distance. From a planetary view, these rituals connect humans to cycles larger than themselves. The Neolithic farmer depends on rain, soil, and sun. Rituals acknowledge this dependence, embedding gratitude and supplication into daily life. Offerings in pits, burials beneath floors, and figurines on hearths all reflect awareness that survival is not solely human effort. Forces of earth and sky must also be engaged. These practices make visible the unseen ties between humanity and environment. One unresolved question is whether these rituals are centralized or household-based. Some evidence points to communal structures, large enclosures, feasting pits, collective ceremonies. Other evidence suggests that much ritual occurs within houses, tied to family and ancestors. Perhaps both levels coexist, reflecting the layered structure of Neolithic life. Each household tends its hearth and ancestors, while larger gatherings unite villages in seasonal rites. This dual scale of ritual mirrors the dual scale of farming, the household field, and the communal landscape. A subtle but powerful image comes from figurines found broken and discarded near hearths. Were they used in rituals that ended with destruction, or were they everyday charms, replaced when worn? Their fragments accumulate in floors and refuse, blending sacred and mundane. Archaeologists sifting through them confront the difficulty of separating ritual from daily life. In farming communities, the two may not be distinct. Every act of planting, grinding, or tending animals may carry sacred resonance. By the close of this section, Europe is no longer only transformed in its fields and villages, but also in its imagination. Beneath house floors, ancestors rest. In ditches, broken pots and axes lie as offerings. On hearths, figurines watch silently. In enclosures, feasts echo with voices. The soil is not merely ground for crops, It is a sacred medium binding life, death, and renewal. Rituals of the earth give shape to belief, ensuring that farming is not only survival, but meaning. As farming spreads along the Atlantic coasts of Europe, new monuments rise from the ground. These are not houses, nor storage pits, nor simple enclosures. They are great stones, lifted and placed in deliberate patterns, forming chambers, alignments, and circles. The megaliths, as they are called, mark a profound transformation in how communities express memory, belief, and unity. They endure for millennia, silent witnesses to the landscapes of the Neolithic. The origins of megalith building lie in the 6th and 5th millennia BCE. Along the Atlantic facade, from Iberia to Brittany, from Ireland to Scandinavia, farmers gathered to raise stones far larger than any needed for daily life. Some formed dolmens, stone chambers covered with earth or smaller stones, creating tombs. Others stand as menhirs, solitary uprights marking particular places. Still others form circles or avenues, aligned with celestial events. These constructions signal a collective effort far beyond household needs. Archaeologists studying these monuments see them as centers of community gathering. To move and erect stones weighing several tons requires cooperation of dozens, even hundreds, of people. Ropes, rollers, and levers are used, though the exact methods remain debated. The act of building is itself ritual, bringing people together in shared labor. The finished monument is not only stone, but also memory, a mark that generations have gathered, worked, and believed as one. One lesser-known detail comes from the site of Barnenez in Brittany, France. Dating to around 4800 BCE, it is one of the oldest known megalithic monuments in Europe. The cairn stretches over 70 meters long, built of stacked stone chambers. Within it, passage graves hold human remains, along with pottery and stone tools. The sheer size of Barnenez shows that megalith building begins early, already complex and monumental. It proves that communities invest in stone long before famous sites like Stonehenge. The purpose of these monuments is still mysterious. Many contain burials, suggesting they serve as tombs for ancestors. Yet they are more than graves. The effort to align passageways with solstices hints at astronomical meaning. At Newgrange in Ireland, built around 3200 BCE, a long passage leads into a central chamber. On the winter solstice, sunlight enters through a roof box, illuminating the chamber's interior. Such precision reveals knowledge of celestial cycles and the desire to connect human time with cosmic time. From a planetary perspective, these monuments reflect a new relationship with permanence. Farming ties people to land, and megaliths anchor memory in stone. While houses decay, fields shift, and forests return, the stones endure. They outlast generations, binding communities across centuries. This permanence is mirrored in other parts of the world. Pyramids in Egypt, mounds in North America, temples in South Asia. Across the Holocene, farming societies invest in monumental architecture to express continuity. The construction of megaliths also transforms landscapes. Stones are often placed on ridges, promontories, or coasts, visible from far away. They become landmarks for travelers and seafarers. Coastal tombs in Iberia and Brittany look out over the ocean, linking land and sea. Inland, alignments mark pathways and boundaries. The monuments inscribe human presence onto vast landscapes, making visible the spread of farming and belief. A subtle detail lies in the art carved on stones. At sites such as Gavrini's in Brittany, Megaliths bear engravings of spirals, axes, zigzags, and boats. These motifs may symbolize fertility, journeys, or cosmic order. Their repetition across regions suggests shared traditions, perhaps carried by seafaring farmers. The carvings reveal that megaliths are not only architecture, but also canvases of symbolic art. They hold meaning in both form and decoration. Mysteries surround the social organization behind megalith building. How did communities coordinate labor for projects so large? Were leaders chosen, or did households contribute equally? Archaeologists debate whether megaliths reflect emerging hierarchies or communal unity. At some sites, burials include lavish goods, suggesting elites. At others, tombs hold many individuals, perhaps entire communities, indicating shared access. The truth may vary, but in all cases, megaliths show the capacity for large-scale cooperation. The presence of megaliths also links Europe by sea. Distribution maps show concentrations along coasts: Iberia, Brittany, Britain, Ireland, Scandinavia. This pattern suggests maritime connections, with ideas and practices spreading by boat. Farmers not only cultivate fields, they also navigate waters, carrying seeds of architecture as well as crops. The Atlantic becomes a corridor of megalithic tradition, binding distant shores with stone. One unresolved question is why megaliths appear in some regions and not others. Central Europe, rich with farming villages, shows little megalithic tradition, focusing instead on longhouses and enclosures. By contrast, Atlantic regions, often less fertile, devote energy to stone monuments. Perhaps marginal lands foster collective identity, expressed in monuments. Or perhaps maritime links spread particular traditions. The reasons remain uncertain, a puzzle of geography and culture. From the scale of daily life, megaliths are places of gathering. Excavations around tombs reveal feasting debris, animal bones, broken pottery, ash from fires. These suggest seasonal ceremonies, where communities meet to honor ancestors and renew ties. Children, adults, and elders may all participate, reinforcing bonds. The monuments are not silent. They echo with voices, songs, and shared meals. Through ritual, they bind farming communities into enduring networks. A subtle clue comes from the reuse of monuments. Some megaliths are built over centuries, expanded with new chambers or cairns. Others are reopened, older bones rearranged, new burials added. This continuity shows that megaliths are living places, revisited by generations. They are not static tombs, but active centers of memory. Each addition reaffirms the connection between the living and the dead, between present and past. Planetary forces frame these practices too. Rising seas of the Holocene gradually reshape coastlines. Some megaliths now lie near drowned shores, once inland but now beside the ocean. These changes remind us that monuments endure even as environments shift. Communities may have watched seas approach slowly, their monuments standing firm against change. The stones outlast climate, anchoring human memory in a changing world. By the close of this section, Europe's landscapes are marked with enduring stone. Along the coasts, cairns and dolmens rise against the sky. On ridges, menhirs stand solitary, casting long shadows. In chambers, bones rest beneath carvings of spirals and axes. At solstices, light pierces dark passages, uniting earth and sky. These monuments reveal that farming life is not only about subsistence, but also about meaning. Communities seek permanence, continuity, and connection, expressed through stone that outlasts them all. As the Neolithic spreads further across Europe, farming reaches the distant shores of the North Sea and the Atlantic. Here, the climate is harsher, the seasons shorter, and the soils often less fertile than the lowest plains of Central Europe. Yet the farmers adapt, carrying their seeds, herds, and traditions into landscapes of wind, rain, and long winters. The story of expansion into these northern regions is one of resilience, experimentation, and transformation. By around 4000 BCE, farming communities are present in the British Isles, Ireland, and the coastal lowlands of northern Europe. The journey has taken centuries, moving step by step along rivers, coasts, and open plains. Each region poses unique challenges. In Denmark and southern Scandinavia, dense forests of oak, beech, and pine cover the land. In Britain, rolling hills and damp valleys test the limits of barley and wheat. In Ireland, heavy rainfall and bogs create waterlogged soils. Yet in each place, farmers find ways to plant, herd, and settle. The crops that reach these northern lands are not identical to those of the Near East. Over generations, varieties of wheat and barley adapt to cooler climates and shorter growing seasons. Emmer and einkorn remain important, but free-threshing wheat also appears, easier to process in damp conditions. Barley, tolerant of poor soils and wet fields, becomes a staple. Archaeologists find charred grains preserved in pits and hearths, their carbonized shells carrying the story of adaptation. Animals also play a key role. Cattle, sheep, and pigs spread with farming into the north, but their management changes. Cattle thrive in meadows along river valleys, while sheep graze on uplands and coastal grasslands. Pigs root in oak and hazel forests, feeding on acorns and nuts. In some regions, animals become more central than crops, providing stability when harvests fail. Isotopic studies of bones confirm diets heavy in animal protein, showing that herds buffer communities against unpredictable harvests. One lesser-known detail comes from the Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland. Though remote, these islands host some of the most remarkable Neolithic monuments in Europe. Villages such as Skara Brae reveal stone-built houses with hearths, beds, and storage built into walls. The use of stone rather than timber reflects adaptation to treeless landscapes. Here, farming endures through ingenuity, with cattle and barley sustaining life in windswept, marginal lands. The monuments of Orkney, including great stone circles like the Ring of Brodgar, testify to a flourishing culture in what seems at first an inhospitable place. Mysteries surround how farming first reached the northern coasts. Did pioneer farmers sail across the Channel and the North Sea, bringing families and herds? Or did foragers adopt crops and animals gradually through contact? Archaeologists debate this, weighing evidence of continuity against signs of migration. Ancient DNA shows both farmer ancestry from continental Europe and persistence of local forager lineages. The result is a blended picture. Farming spreads not only by movement of people, but also by exchange, intermarriage, and adaptation. From a planetary perspective, this expansion reflects the global reach of farming during the Holocene. By the 4th millennium BCE, crops and herds have spread from their original homelands into distant environments across continents. In East Asia, rice and millet reach the Yellow River valleys. In the Americas, maize spreads northward. In Europe, wheat and barley now grow under northern skies, nourished by rains from the Atlantic. Farming proves resilient, capable of crossing latitudes and climates. The building traditions of northern farmers leave enduring traces. Long barrows, elongated earthen mounds covering wooden or stone chambers, appear in Britain and Scandinavia. These monuments, often used for collective burials, link communities to land and ancestors. Causewayed enclosures, with circular ditches and banks, serve as gathering places for ritual and exchange. Megalithic tombs, cairns, and stone circles rise along coasts, connecting northern Europe to the broader megalithic tradition of the Atlantic facade. These constructions reveal that farming communities invest not only in subsistence, but also in symbols of permanence and unity. A subtle detail lies in the persistence of fishing and foraging alongside farming. Even as crops and animals dominate, coastal communities continue to harvest shellfish, catch fish, and hunt seals. Shell middens, great heaps of discarded shells, remain common in Denmark and Scotland. Isotopic evidence from human bones confirms diets that blend terrestrial and marine resources. Farming does not erase older traditions, but merges with them, creating hybrid economies suited to local environments. The challenges of the northern climate are evident in archaeological remains. At some sites, layers of abandoned fields suggest that soils quickly lose fertility under repeated cropping. Communities respond by shifting plots, mixing ash and dung into soil, and rotating animals through pastures. These strategies reveal ingenuity in sustaining farming under difficult conditions. Yet failures also occur. Villages are sometimes deserted, fields overgrown, and lands reclaimed by forest or bog. Farming in the north is never easy, always a negotiation with weather and soil. One unresolved mystery concerns the role of climate shifts in shaping these communities. Around 3200 BCE, a period of cooling and increased rainfall spreads across northern Europe. Archaeologists call it the Neolithic decline in some regions, as settlements shrink and monuments fall into disuse. Did colder, wetter summers damage crops? Did communities adapt by relying more on animals and fish? The answers remain uncertain, but the fragility of northern farming is clear. Human endurance here is always tied to shifting skies. From a planetary view, the expansion to the North Sea coasts highlights the adaptability of cultural traditions. Farmers carry not only seeds and animals, but also knowledge of building, burial, and ritual. Long barrows in Britain echo cairns in Brittany. Stone circles in Orkney resonate with monuments in Iberia. Though separated by seas, communities share traditions, connected by maritime routes. The spread of farming is thus not only ecological, but cultural, binding distant shores into a web of memory. Another subtle clue lies in rock art. In Scandinavia, carvings of boats, axes, and animals appear on stones. These images may reflect rituals tied to farming, navigation, or cosmology. They show that northern farmers, like their southern counterparts, embed belief in landscapes. Stone becomes a canvas for meaning, just as fields and monuments do. Through art, people inscribe their relationship with land and sea. By the close of this section, the Neolithic has reached its northern limits. Along the coasts of the North Sea, longhouses stand amid fields of barley. Cattle graze in damp meadows, sheep on upland slopes. Shell middens grow beside fishing camps, while monuments of stone rise against the sky. In Orkney, Skara Brae's stone houses cluster by the sea. In Denmark, causewayed enclosures mark gathering places. Across the north, farming adapts, endures, and reshapes landscapes. Though climate and soil resist, communities persist, blending old and new ways. The expansion to the North Sea is not the end of the story, but another chapter in the long journey of farming across Europe. Beneath the soil of Neolithic Europe, traces of ancestry remain. In bones preserved in graves, in teeth sealed with enamel, and in fragments of ancient DNA. Scientists uncover stories hidden for millennia. These genetic clues reveal that the spread of farming is not only about seeds, animals, and villages, but also about people, migrations, encounters, and mixtures that shape the continent's future. The hidden mysteries in DNA add depth to the archaeological record, showing how humans themselves carried the Neolithic westward. The first farmers of Europe, as genetic studies reveal, descend largely from populations of Anatolia. When agriculture begins in the Fertile Crescent, families gradually move across Anatolia and into the Balkans. Their descendants carry characteristic genetic markers that distinguish them from the Mesolithic foragers of Europe, who trace their ancestry back to Ice Age populations. When farming villages appear along the Danube and Rhine, their skeletons show the DNA of Anatolian origins. This evidence confirms that farming spreads not only by ideas, but also by the movement of people. Yet the story is not simple replacement. In many regions, DNA reveals mixture. Farmers intermarry with foragers, blending ancestries. At some sites, early generations of farmers show little evidence of local ancestry, but later generations reveal gradual integration. For example, in Central Europe, skeletons from LBK villages initially appear genetically distinct from local hunter-gatherers. Over time, however, new layers of ancestry emerge, showing that encounters with foragers lead to blended communities. Farming is not imposed in one step, but evolves through contact and union. One lesser-known detail comes from the Baltic region. Here, foragers persist longer than in Central Europe. Ancient DNA shows that local groups retain their own ancestry well into the Neolithic, even while adopting some farming practices. When mixture does occur, it leaves complex signatures, individuals with both farmer and forager ancestry buried in the same cemeteries. This blending suggests that cultural exchange may precede full integration. The persistence of forager DNA highlights the mosaic nature of Europe's Neolithic. Mysteries remain about how widespread these mixtures are. In some areas, farmers and foragers seem to remain separate for centuries, with little intermarriage. In others, they blend quickly. Why this variation? Archaeologists and geneticists debate the reasons. Geography may play a role, mountains and forests limiting contact, or rivers encouraging it. Social choices also matter. Some communities may welcome newcomers, while others resist. The genetic record reveals outcomes, but the processes remain elusive. From a planetary perspective, Europe's genetic story fits into a larger pattern. Across the world, the spread of farming is linked to migrations. In East Asia, DNA shows the expansion of rice farmers from the Yangtze and millet farmers from the Yellow River. In Africa, the Bantu migrations carry farming and herding southward. In the Americas, maize spreads with movements of people. Everywhere, the Holocene sees genes move alongside seeds. Europe's Neolithic is one branch of this global reshaping of humanity. Another subtle clue lies in evidence of adaptation. Ancient DNA shows genetic changes linked to farming lifestyles. For example, genes associated with lactose tolerance, the ability to digest milk in adulthood, emerge later in Europe, after dairying is well established. Early farmers consume milk, but most are lactose intolerant. Over time, natural selection favors individuals with mutations that allow milk digestion, especially in northern climates where milk is a vital resource. This adaptation, still widespread today, begins in the Neolithic. Other adaptations appear as well. Genes linked to immunity shift, reflecting new exposures from close contact with domesticated animals. Living with cattle, sheep, and pigs increases risks of disease. Over generations, genetic defenses strengthen. Farming not only reshapes diets and landscapes, but also the human body itself. DNA holds the record of these subtle yet profound changes. One unresolved question is how much migration versus cultural adoption explains the spread of farming in different regions. In the Balkans and Central Europe, evidence points strongly to migration, with Anatolian ancestry dominant. In Northern Europe, however, mixture with local foragers plays a larger role. The British Isles show complex patterns. Early farmers arrive with continental ancestry, but later waves of movement bring additional diversity. Ancient DNA reveals that the Neolithic is not a single movement, but many waves, overlapping and interacting. Archaeologists use these findings to revisit old debates. For decades, scholars argued whether farming spread by diffusion of ideas or by migration of people. The genetic record now shows that both are true, in varying proportions across space and time. In some valleys, farmers arrive as migrants, settling new lands. In others, local foragers adopt crops and herds, blending them into their traditions. DNA fills gaps left by pots, bones, and fields, offering a more nuanced picture. A subtle but powerful example comes from the cemetery of Blätterhöhle in Germany. Here, individuals with very different ancestries are buried side by side, some descended from Anatolian farmers, others from local foragers. Isotopic studies reveal different diets as well. Farmer-descended individuals eating grains and domestic animals. Forager-descended individuals relying on fish and wild foods. Yet, in death, they share the same burial ground. This coexistence in ritual spaces highlights how intertwined their lives must have been. From the planetary scale, these genetic stories reveal the interconnectedness of human populations. Even before written records, people move, mix, and carry traditions across continents. No community is entirely isolated. Rivers, coasts, and trails link them into networks. DNA is the archive of these movements, preserving what pottery and tools cannot. It is a reminder that the Neolithic is not only cultural change, but demographic transformation. Mysteries still linger in the genetic record. For example, the ancestry of the first farmers of Iberia shows some differences from those of Central Europe, suggesting distinct routes of migration. Did farmers sail along the Mediterranean coast, bypassing the Balkans? Or did they move inland and then spread west? Ancient DNA offers clues, but not definitive answers. Each new skeleton adds another piece to the puzzle, refining the map of human movement. The genetic legacy of the Neolithic endures. Modern Europeans carry ancestry from three main sources: Mesolithic foragers, Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, and later steppe herders from the east. The farming contribution is foundational, woven into every population. Without it, the agricultural lifeways of Europe would never have taken root. The DNA of those early farmers still flows in millions of people today, a living connection to the Neolithic. By the close of this section, the picture of Europe's first farmers deepens. They are not abstract figures planting wheat in empty fields. They are migrants from Anatolia, mixing with foragers, adapting to new climates, reshaping their bodies through diet and disease. Their DNA reveals migrations across seas, unions across traditions, and selections that shape humanity for millennia. The stones, seeds, and houses tell one part of the story. The hidden code within bones tells another, a story of movement, blending, and adaptation that lies at the heart of the Neolithic. As the Neolithic draws to a close, the legacy of the first farmers settles deeply into Europe's landscapes. Fields of wheat and barley stretch across valleys once filled with forest. Herds of cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs graze where aurochs and wild boar once roamed freely. Villages of timber and clay cluster near rivers, their hearths burning steadily through generations. Stone monuments rise against horizons, megaliths standing as reminders of collective memory. The roots of continuity are planted here, in the daily practices of Neolithic life. The transformation is vast. Foragers still remain in some places, along coasts and forests, but the balance has shifted. Farming dominates much of Europe, creating stable communities tied to place. Populations grow, supported by reliable harvests and herds. Cemeteries expand, monuments multiply, and cultural traditions spread. The Neolithic world is no longer fragile and tentative. It has become the foundation of Europe's long-term development. One of the most enduring legacies is in the landscape itself. Forests are cut back, fields carved out, and pastures maintained. Even after thousands of years, traces of these clearings remain visible in pollen records and soils. What appear today as natural European meadows often have their origin in Neolithic grazing and burning. The shaping of ecosystems by humans, begun in this era, continues unbroken into the present. The earth itself carries memory of the first farmers' work. Agriculture also changes diet and health. Bones of Neolithic people show shifts in nutrition, more cavities from starchy foods, signs of repetitive strain from grinding grain, and evidence of lower stature compared to some foragers. Yet they also show resilience, larger communities supported through lean seasons, children surviving where mobility once limited family size. Farming reshapes the human body and lifespan, anchoring life in rhythms of planting and harvest. One lesser-known detail lies in the persistence of wild foods. Even as farming dominates, people continue to gather berries, nuts, and mushrooms, and to fish rivers and seas. Hazelnuts remain abundant in archaeological layers. Shells continue to pile in middens, and fish bones are found in village refuse. Farming never fully excludes foraging. Instead, it weaves old and new together, creating diverse diets and strategies. This flexibility ensures resilience when harvests fail or herds suffer. Genetic evidence reveals continuity, too. The DNA of Anatolian farmers spreads across Europe, mixing with local forager lineages. Over centuries, these ancestries blend, creating the foundation of modern European populations. Traits linked to farming, like lactose tolerance, emerge and spread, shaping physiology. The genetic legacy of the Neolithic endures in millions of people alive today, a hidden link between ancient villages and modern cities. Mysteries remain about how societies were organized. Did permanent villages foster hierarchies, or did they remain largely egalitarian? Some cemeteries show distinctions in grave goods, hinting at social roles. Others reveal more equal distributions. The construction of megaliths suggests collective effort, yet the presence of rich burials like those at Varna hints at emerging elites. The Neolithic holds both cooperation and inequality, seeds of future complexity in European societies. From a planetary perspective, the Neolithic is a turning point in human history. Across continents, farming reshapes lives. In the Fertile Crescent, rice fields of the Yangtze, maize plots of Mesoamerica, and yams in Africa. Communities settle and transform landscapes. In Europe, this global process takes unique form. Fields among forests, megaliths by coasts, longhouses on river plains. The legacy is part of a wider story of humanity binding itself to land. Architecture reflects this continuity. Though timber houses decay, their patterns persist. Villages are rebuilt on the same sites, generation after generation. Floors are replastered, walls repaired, hearths reignited. Over centuries, these layers accumulate, forming tells, mounds of settlement debris rising above plains. Archaeologists digging through them uncover sequences of life, each layer a continuation of the last. This rhythm of rebuilding ties communities to place across deep time. Ritual also endures. Figurines, burials, enclosures, and megaliths reveal belief in cycles of fertility, ancestors, and renewal. These practices link communities not only to land, but to memory. Ancestors buried beneath floors or in tombs remain part of daily life. Feasts at monuments reaffirm ties across villages. The stones and earthworks endure long after builders pass, anchoring traditions. Rituals of the Neolithic set patterns for belief that echo into later European religions and mythologies. A subtle clue lies in the spread of trade networks. Obsidian from the Aegean, jadeite axes from the Alps, amber from the Baltic. Each travels vast distances. These objects outlast their makers, passing from hand to hand, village to village. Exchange networks span hundreds of kilometers, binding Europe into webs of contact. Such connections endure beyond the Neolithic, laying groundwork for later systems of commerce and interaction. The continent becomes a network of linked communities, not isolated villages. Mysteries still surround the decline of the Neolithic. By the late 4th millennium BCE, new influences arrive from the east. Steppe herders carrying horses, wagons, and new technologies. Farming continues, but societies shift. Did climate change, population pressure, or external migrations weaken Neolithic traditions? Archaeologists debate these questions, piecing together evidence. Yet the roots of continuity remain. Even as cultures change, farming persists, fields are planted, and animals are herded. The Neolithic foundation is never erased. From the planetary scale, the Neolithic legacy extends far beyond its original boundaries. The impact of farming on soils, forests, rivers, and human bodies is irreversible. Carbon from ancient forest burning lingers in ice cores. Genetic adaptations persist in populations. Monuments of stone still stand, visited by modern eyes. The Neolithic is not a distant past, but a layer of continuity beneath the present. By the close of this section, the picture of Europe is transformed. Where once only foragers roamed, farming villages dot landscapes from the Mediterranean to the North Sea. Fields ripple with grain, cattle graze in meadows, and stone monuments mark horizons. Rivers link communities, seas carry traditions, and DNA binds generations together. The first farmers of Europe are long gone, yet their legacy endures. In land, in food, in ancestry, and in culture. The Neolithic Revolution is not a brief chapter. It is the root system from which Europe's later histories grow. The story of Europe's first farmers is one of slow transformation. From foragers moving through forests and rivers, to communities sowing fields and raising herds. The change unfolds over centuries. Villages of timber and clay rise, fields open in woodland clearings, and great stones are lifted into place. With each step, people anchor themselves more firmly to land, to ancestors, and to cycles of soil and sky. Yet mysteries remain. Why did some foragers adopt farming quickly, while others resisted for generations? What beliefs guided the building of monuments aligned with stars? How did languages shift as farmers and foragers blended? These questions echo unanswered, preserved only in fragments of bone, pollen, and stone. The past does not give us every detail, but it offers glimpses, enough to remind us of continuity and change. The legacy of the Neolithic still lingers. Fields of grain, grazing animals, pottery vessels, and rituals of memory are not only ancient practices, they remain foundations of European life today. The seeds chosen in Anatolia, the cattle tamed in distant valleys, the houses built of timber and clay, all endure in different forms. Beneath modern landscapes lies the imprint of the first farmers, their choices carried forward across millennia. As the story closes, silence returns. Rivers flow as they did before. Forests whisper at the edges of fields, and stones stand unmoving under shifting skies. The first farmers of Europe are gone, yet their presence endures, in land shaped by hand, in genes carried through generations, in traditions that echo still. The Neolithic is not only past, but a quiet root beneath the present, holding humanity to the earth.